All right, thank you. All right, well, thanks everybody for joining. My name is Dave Santellis and I'll be your host. This is one of the first webinars that we're kicking off in the Asia Pacific Japan region for the PreSales Collective. Essentially, the title of this webinar is Female Stories from the Front Line. We're going to be talking about diversity, equality, and inclusion in pre-sales. We have some panelists today, and I'll go into some further depth later on in the webinar, but essentially we have Sonya Capuzzi, who's an enterprise solution engineer from Salesforce. We have Hannah Trimby, who's a principal enterprise architect at Salesforce, and we have Dimpy Gupta, who's a senior solution consultant from Pega Systems. And I'm your host, Dave Santellis. Pre-sales, look, this says engineering leader. I'm a solution architect leader. And it's pretty interesting how that name gets changed around. So the solution architecture, the solution engineering, the sales engineering, essentially it's all pre-sales. So thanks everybody for your time. So PreSales Collective, what is our mission? What is our vision? Essentially, we're on a mission to elevate the role of pre-sales in organizations worldwide. We aim to provide pre-sales professionals with the resources, the knowledge, network, and mentorship to develop long, impactful careers in pre-sales. Our vision is to create a global community of professionals who have a passion for pre-sales, a place where individuals in a pre-sales role or anyone who aspires to be will be supported in their professional development. And this is fairly crucial because what we're talking about here is allowing people to talk to one another about their pre-sales profession. And I haven't seen anything like this before, which is why I'm excited to be a part of the PreSales Collective and excited to be a part of this webinar today. So how to get the most out of today's webinar? Look, ask questions, right? Be involved, listen in, give some feedback. Let us know what your thoughts are in the chat. So we have our chat moderator, who's Jonas Lim, who's also going to be assisting today. And he'll be on the chat to be able to echo some of those responses that you have. And I'll be asking a few questions as well throughout just to get some feedback from you all. So essentially, these are our three panelists. So Sonya is an enterprise solutions engineer, so working at Salesforce, which if you haven't heard of Salesforce, where have you been? It's a SaaS company that focuses on client relationship management systems, but also has various other systems and applications that can help bring business value to customers everywhere. Hannah also works for Salesforce and is a enterprise architect, a principal enterprise architect for Salesforce. And it'll be very interesting to see how those roles differ. And we have Dimpy as well, who works for Pega Systems, who is a leading technology, leader in systems that involve chat systems and chatbots and AI and so on. But I'll let Dimpy talk more about that. And you have myself as the host. So Paul, pull up your chat windows. Let's ask a question. So do you feel being a female in this industry is an advantage or a challenge? Let's give it a few seconds, probably about 10 seconds. Start voting. It's very interesting as well. There's a lot of perception out there and everybody would have different kind of views on this topic. And also, depending if you're male or female, you would have different views on this topic. So it's very interesting to see some of the results coming in.
Right, looks like we have 88% yes. The poll is still going on.
Poll is still going on.
Yeah,
and if you're on the call and you're male, please let us understand your perception on the topic. Okay, how are we going, Jonas?
So we have 8 who voted yes and 1 no. That's 89 to 11%, David.
Okay, let me just share those results. Okay, we have 89% yes and 11% no. So 89% of people on the call believe that it is an advantage. 1% believes that it is a challenge. Look, that's very interesting to see, because I know that when I started in pre-sales probably 20 years ago, a lot of females that I did speak to in pre-sales were finding it very challenging. And it's actually great to see that there have been some movements in some major corporations to be more diverse and allow it to be more welcoming to females. So I'm going to stop sharing there.
Can I ask a question?
Sure, Gavin.
I found the question a little bit difficult to answer, because it's almost like it's asking two questions in one. Is it an advantage or is it a challenge?
Yep. So the question is it an advantage or is it a challenge?
So if I respond yes, am I saying is it an advantage or a challenge?
Yeah, and you're absolutely right. It was not worded correctly. So essentially, yes is an advantage, no is a challenge.
Okay, cool. And I'm just curious, because I sometimes think it's an advantage. I think there's also challenges as well, but I think it's an advantage because very generically, sort of speaking, I think females and women in IT can be a little bit more empathetic and less focused on product, and I think that can be quite an advantage for a female coming into the industry.
Yeah, absolutely. And Gavin, I think you've raised a very good point. So perhaps, Jonas, can we run the poll again? And we'll say yes is an advantage and no is a challenge, because perhaps we kind of misconstrued that feedback. So let's run this poll again. Thanks, Gavin, for pointing that out. Yes is an advantage and no is a challenge. So let's redo this poll.
I think just while the results coming in as well, just throw on another 2 cents. I think it's wonderful having women in the IT industry. I think it gives a much better balance and perspective on things internally or externally. I think it's really good.
Yeah, absolutely, Gavin. Just looking at these results already, wow. Okay, so the first poll was wrong. What we're finding is that people are seeing it as more of a challenge being female in this industry. Let me just share the result. Okay, so there we go. Wow, interesting. But you know what? Not unexpected. So let's start hearing some of the stories. But before I do that, I want to just talk a little bit about some of the information we found out there from McKinsey, delivering through diversity. So women represent 23% of the workforce in IT pre-sales. That's a lot lower than I foresaw when I first read this. Companies in the top quartile for gender diversity are 21% more likely to outperform on profitability and 27% more likely to have superior value creation. This all comes from that gender diversity capability within the organization. The highest performing companies on both profitability and diversity had more women in revenue generating roles. So this is amazing information, because it kind of supports what I believe, which is having a balanced and diverse workforce allows a diversity, not just in gender, but a diversity in thought, a diversity in capability for the team. And what that allows you to do is to solve extremely complicated challenges in your role, which is what pre-sales does, but it allows you to do it from different perspectives. And this is where I've seen massive returns and capabilities from having a gender diverse team, but also a generally diverse team. So essentially, back in my time at VMware, I had a diverse team of about 40% female. And what happened was that there was great discussions about how we should move forward as a team. There were great strategic inputs from all sides, and there were very respectful conversations. And now at Qualtrics, it is the same. So I have a diverse team. We have 50% female in my team, but essentially the amazing diversity of thought that gets spawned from our conversations and from our strategic meetings it's legendary, right? It solves those complicated problems and it creates a kind of magic and a buzz. And that's what happens when you have that 40, 50%, 60% kind of diversity in your team. So yeah, I absolutely echo all of these figures. I've seen quite a lot of success from that. But just moving on, I think it's time to get into our panelists to hear their story. We're not here for my story, but essentially we're here to hear from Sonya, Hannah, and Dimpy. So look, we'll start with you, Sonya. Can you give us a bit of a background and understanding about what you do at Salesforce?
Thanks, David, and thanks for having me on today. So I'm a principal solution engineer. So I'm working pre-sales. I support the industries team in the enterprise space, but basically listening to customer requirements and coming up with solutions of how we can solve them. So I've actually been at Salesforce going on 10 years. And I started as an architect in the architect space. So I got to see both sides of the fence, from delivery into pre-sales as well.
Excellent. And Hannah, why don't you tell us a little bit about your role at Salesforce and maybe how principal enterprise architect might differ to, say, Sonia's capacity as an enterprise solution engineer?
Sure. Hi, everyone. Lovely to be here. So my role is still in pre-sales. A lot of architects sit on the delivery side of the fence, but my one is predominantly in pre-sales. So I work with customers to help them with their transformation priorities. So it's the link between what they're trying to do organizationally from a strategic perspective, and then trying to help them co-create business and technology architecture, and then a roadmap to get them to where they want to be. In terms of how it differs from Sonia's role, I've recently been in Sonia's role. I've just changed role. So in terms of how they differ, they're very similar. Sonya has a very similar background to myself, but mine is more around the capabilities and the strategy lens rather than the product capability.
Oh, interesting. And Dimpy, if you could give us a bit of a background about your role at Pega Systems and a bit of a background on Pega Systems as well.
Sure. Hi, everyone. This is Dimpy. I have about 15 years of work experience, most of which has been in client-facing roles and just about 10 in pre-sales. I work with Pega Systems, where my team is uniquely positioned to speak to every single vertical and every single horizontal. Anything and everything workflow and digital transformation is what we are involved with at Pega. While some verticals are more pronounced than the others, like FS, healthcare, and government, we get to diversify immensely, which is my favorite part of the job and keeps me going on a path of being a lifelong learner.
Wow, interesting. Okay, and just an idea of background in terms of tenure. So Dimpy, while we have you, how long have you been working as a senior solutions engineer?
In pre-sales capacity, almost around 10 years now.
Okay, excellent. And Hannah?
In pre-sales, coming up to 5 years now.
Yep, okay. But I guess in the industry, how long have you been?
In the industry, about 18 years.
Oh, wow. Okay. And Dimpy, so you said 10 years. Have you also been in the industry?
Yes, so about 15 that way. I do have some development background and some project management background.
Wow, awesome. And Sonya, what about how many years in pre-sales and how many years in the industry?
Yeah, so I think showing my age a bit, but I've been in the industry 21 years and in pre-sales exclusively for over 7.
Wow. So a lot of you have essentially made the move into pre-sales almost mid-career. That's very interesting. So look, I really want to hear everybody's story. So how about Sonya, if we could start with you. Help us to understand your story when it comes to pre-sales.
Yeah, I think for me, I always was trying to balance business and technology. So my mind always liked to solve business problems. I studied commerce as my undergraduate degree, and I kind of fell into the world of IT based on the skill sets I did in my commerce degree, but combining, at the time it was accounting and e-commerce technology. And so I was on a progression of going through, I was actually a software engineer as part of my grad program. And yeah, so I've worn so many different hats, and I've got to work for consulting companies, for customers directly, and then working on the vendor side as well. So I think building out that rich view of all parts of the ecosystem gives you a good appreciation of what the sales cycle looks like, and what it's like to be on that other side of the fence. Yeah, so moving across from, so at the time I was an architect when I joined Salesforce, working on really big strategic projects. And what I was finding was that some of that initiation or that innovation, that innovative thinking was already in motion by the time I got to work on it. So I'd be given a big task and say, go and architect this program of work. So what drew me to pre-sales was really jumping across to the other side of the fence and thinking about, where does that initiation of those ideas really start? How do we spark that energy and that enthusiasm in customers to really want to change and do things differently? So yeah, that was a big draw for me to move across to pre-sales. And also, as being an architect, you realise you have to have a bigger influence and get better at your presentation skills and how you articulate in front of audiences. So that I found really interesting going across to pre-sales as well.
Wow, that's pretty cool. And Hannah, what about your experience? What's your story like?
Sure. Well, I'm originally from the UK. I've been in Melbourne for around 12 years now. My first role was in IT, and it was in delivery consulting with Accenture in the UK. And I worked with lots of customers like BAE Systems, where I was literally the only female in the building.
Wow.
It was very long days. I used to work 16-hour days as the norm. So I burnt out basically and took a career break, and decided I wanted to follow my passion in life, which was scuba diving. So took a 2-year career break, lived in Thailand on an island for a while, and then decided I missed using my brain and actually did want a career in IT. So I moved to Melbourne and started work again in delivery with CA Technologies, and I worked my way into architecture, consulting and delivery, and then finally found my calling in pre-sales with Salesforce.
Wow, that's really scuba diving. Wow. Dimpy, what about your story?
My story goes way back. In fact, like I come from a small city from the heartland of India. When I was a little girl, my father always narrated these superhero stories to me, which made me want to fly. As I got a little older, I realized the closest it came to was practically was to be an aeronautical engineer. But as time passed, the aeronautical bit got dropped, as this course was not offered by most colleges in my region. But the engineer dream stayed. And here I am today, completing 15 years in the industry. Almost all of these years have been spent in the client-facing roles across various business verticals, and about 10 in pre-sales capacity. What I love most about being a pre-sales is it allows me to be creative while being close to the technology. I just love the problem solving process and kind of, putting the pieces together and, creating value for the customers. That gives me a high.
Yeah, creating value, that's absolutely key. That's very interesting. So we've heard a touch on this throughout, but is this what you would say made you choose pre-sales, Dimpy, as a career path?
Absolutely. Storytelling is something which I'm very fond of, and I'm a technologist at heart. So marrying the two worlds together, like I'm getting the best of both worlds, that keeps me going.
Excellent. And Hannah, coming across back from Thailand to Melbourne, it's interesting to see that, you did go to CA Technologies and so on, but making the move into pre-sales, why did you pick that as a career path, and why are you still in that pre-sales capacity?
Yeah, sure. I think for me, pre-sales it gives you the opportunity to work at the visionary level. I think when you're in delivery, that's great also, but it's very down in the detail, and it's delivering on a strategy that's already been formulated. Whereas in pre-sales, you actually get the opportunity to work with the customer up front and shape that vision and help them get to where they're going. So it's very varied, it's very interesting. You've never got a week that's the same. And it's also an area that's open to everyone, I think. So I know people in pre-sales who've come from English literature backgrounds, biology, and some obviously with the traditional IT background, but it's the soft skills that are important, like the ability to listen to the customer and as Dimpy says, solve their problems in creative ways. So it is the dream job.
Wow. And Sonya, what about yourself? I mean, what keeps you in pre-sales? What is so attractive about it as a career path?
I think Hannah touched on it as well, is that variety that you get. So it's not like you're wedded to one project for 6 months or 12 months, that every week is constantly different. And if you're not solving different customer challenges, you're getting up to speed on new technology that's coming out and working out how that applies to your customer's world. So I think maintaining that level of interest, there's always something new out there, a better way or a new way of doing things.
Yeah, cool. And Sonya, have you ever come across a scenario like Hannah where you were the only female in the building?
So when I joined the pre-sales team, I was the only female in the enterprise team, in ANZ. And so I think with that came you're just more visible. Everyone remembers your name because you're the only female in the room. And so that can be a good thing if you want that attention. But I think for me, I was still learning. And so you're a bit wary of getting that memory of always being remembered. Yeah.
See, I think in pre-sales, you're always learning. So it feels like it would be a lot of pressure. Did it feel like a lot of pressure on you being the only female?
I think I became aware of that I did stand out. But other than that, it's always a mixed bag. I think it goes beyond gender. Of some people are really helpful and some people aren't so helpful. So yeah, it's just finding people that will support you along the way and being in a space where you can learn a lot.
Support is extremely important from peers and from peers outside of your organization as well. So have you always been interested in technology?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it wasn't necessarily something that I thought of, that's where I wanted to go when I was doing my undergraduate degree. But I did really well in my second year at uni, and it was actually a female lecturer in one of my programming subjects that put me onto a Head Start program to work in the industry and do consulting. So I think if it wasn't for little bumps along the way like that, where she invited me back to be a tutor for first years and doing things like that, that sort of really sparked my interest. And then I realised how you can apply what you've learned in the business world and execute on that through the lens of technology.
Wow, that's really interesting. I wonder, Hannah, Dimpy, did you also have a female role model that perhaps guided you towards a technology path?
I didn't initially. I think up until I was about 17, I was convinced I wanted to pursue a career in psychology. But actually, when I started studying that, I realized it wasn't for me, and I decided to make the switch to IT just before I started university. And that was a challenge in itself. I was a very long way behind the computer whiz kids that typically do software engineering courses. So I really struggled in my first year, particularly in programming and things like that. But by the second year, I was doing much better. And an internship with IBM helped me along. But there's nothing like on-the-job learning.
Wow. And Dimpy?
For me, I would say it wasn't intentional, like being in a pre-sales role. Technology, yes. In fact, when I started my career, I wasn't aware of what my options were. I did my engineering and I was recruited by an MNC in India in the campus drive and started as a developer, as technology was my only passion then. About 1 year on, there was this opportunity of a client-facing role that my manager brought up, and I took up the challenge, and there my pre-sales journey began. The very fact that, as a pre-sales, you get to drive end-to-end solutioning and also touch and interact with every aspect of the product and services you're trying to sell. whether it's it's the product development or marketing. So the way you kind of interact, you don't work in silos anymore. You kind of get to collaborate and interact across organization was a big hype for me. So, and again, after this, there was no looking back. I mean, the immense potential to influence both internal and external stakeholders. And again, coming back to creating value for customers, it just kept me going, and there was no looking back after that. But yeah, definitely when I started, it wasn't intentional. It wasn't something I kind of, thought I would do when I was in college. No.
So while I have you, Dimpy, can I ask you, do you feel being a female in the industry is an advantage or a disadvantage?
So when we did the first poll, I think I was the only one. There was just one person who said no, right? I think it was me.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was me. And the reason why I chose no is because I wouldn't box it in either a challenge or advantage. In fact, I look at it as an opportunity. Though I must admit, in my personal experience, it has been a mixed bag. There were times I was being judged and just judged as a pretty face and maybe ignored. And also there were times when the stakeholders were more interested to listen to me or to know what I bring to the table, just for the reason that there was a female in the room who was kind of leading the discussion. The reason why I consider this to be an opportunity is because we as pre-sales get this uninterrupted show time to talk about the value we can create for the customers. Whether it's a presentation, it's a demo, it's a workshop. This uninterrupted time is where you make a difference, where you can make a difference and turn things around. You might have the best product offering under your organization's umbrella, but it's unless you carry it correctly to the client vision and target state, the client is unlikely to buy. Even in some cases, I would say, pre-sales, I mean, we do that very often. We kind of double up as business consultants and work closely with the customer to kind of create their vision, their design. I mean, we co-create it with them and also path on how they can achieve it. To me, that is very powerful in enabling experience. So that's why I say I look at it as an opportunity rather than it's been a challenge sometimes, also an advantage sometimes, but more than that, it's an opportunity to make a difference.
Wow, good perspective. Yep. And Sonya, what about yourself? Do you see it as being a challenge or an opportunity or an advantage?
So like I was saying before, I think when you're in the minority, you stand out. And so that can be a good thing or not.
Yeah.
And definitely, I think it's becoming less and less of an issue. We achieve almost parity in our teams now as far as gender diversity goes. And I think diversity is much more than just gender. We're multifaceted people. So I think that's just one part of who we are and what makes us good at our job. But I think there is a perception that there needs to be a balance of gender and people are more aware of it these days. But what I would say is that I guess the best way I can describe it is an example I had where one of my first big keynotes that I was doing a big presentation on, it was really scary in front of hundreds of people. We were in the preparation for it. I was really nervous in the prep session. And one of my male colleagues who'd wanted that gig had made the comment, "You only got the gig because you're female," and then said that to my face.
Wow. Okay.
And so I think pausing and thinking about that statement that he said at the time, that when you reflect on it, I was actually more experienced in the industry, more tenure at the company, senior in my role. So by every facet, I was qualified beyond. But at that moment, they were insecure about why they didn't get the gig. And so I think taking a step back and not getting offended, not making an issue of a statement like that, just being confident in your own skill set and think, well, no, I've earned my spot here. And when you hear comments like that, pull the person aside and talk to them about the impact that it has. but don't take it to heart. Don't get offended by it. Yeah, just keep on your own path.
That's great advice. That's simply the other person's insecurity, as you mentioned. And it's funny because you raise a topic that I'm sure every single female who is in IT, let alone pre-sales, is probably going to face. I've heard a few people talk like that, and I've absolutely addressed that issue immediately. But it is a common thing that I've seen pop up. So that's really good advice to help address that. And Hannah, what about yourself? So do you see being a female an advantage or a challenge in the industry?
It's both. So I would completely agree with Sonya that it feels like the spotlight's on you as a female in a minority group. And I think in the early days, especially, that made me very self-conscious. I used to struggle with blushing a lot and lack of confidence early on. And when I spoke in team meetings, I felt like a flustered high schooler and I just hated it. And it really held me back initially. But I think as my career has progressed, I've got more comfortable with being uncomfortable. And I would say being a competent female in IT is an advantage because it's a point of differentiation and it can propel you forward in your career as long as you know your stuff. And I think that's the balance, isn't it? Because there's increased focus, you do feel like you need to be more competent than someone who perhaps wasn't in the spotlight.
Wow, that's quite insightful. So more comfortable with the uncomfortable is a pretty good quote there. And I'm going to steal that and use that, Hannah. I hope you don't mind.
That's okay.
But also the other thing you said about really knowing your stuff. I mean, we're all professionals, you know, we're all paid to do what we do, and we are paid to know our stuff. This is what it's about. Thanks, Hannah. That's very, very good information. So what I'd like to do is start asking the panelists for, I guess, some advice for some females who may have joined the webinar and maybe starting the career or maybe mid-career and may be having some challenges or may have experienced some challenges and maybe not handled it in their best way. Dimpy, what are your thoughts on that? What advice would you give to some females, firstly, that are considering pre-sales or just in general in the industry?
All right, I'll try to rhyme it a little bit. Okay, if storytelling is your art and technology is in your heart, pre-sales is just the right role for you. Why I say this is while you get a chance to keep abreast with all the new technology in this space, you also get wings to creatively approach problem solving and creating value for your customers. And of course, kind of making revenue for your organization. It does come with ample perks also, like based on the region, based on, the region your org focuses on. Some things like travel, if that's something. I mean, it was a big, it was very exciting for me. There was this one time where I had, 3 meals in a day, all in different countries. So I had breakfast in Singapore, I had lunch meeting in Malaysia, and then we had a wrap up in Thailand with some clients. And we did close some business that day. So that's the highlight of my, that's one of the highlights of my pre-sales career. So it does come with perks, but let me also tell you, it's a high pressure role. Each client meeting, each demo, each workshop that we conduct or we are a part of is an opportunity to set pace for the sales cycle. Pre-sales need to market both internally and externally. You touch and interact every aspect of the product. So it's a high visibility role. So it's a product or a service, whatever you're trying to help to sell, you have high visibility. You are the advocate for the customer, and you should be able to, address the business value of why a customer should go down a specific path with your product or solution. So, in the simplest term, I would say you need to be that champion for your customer. So it's a big responsibility. But if you love problem solving, if you love the challenges, and if you want to be a lifelong learner, a career in pre-sales is the right choice for you. That's my advice.
Wow, that sounds awesome. Sign me up. Hannah, what about yourself? What advice would you give to females that may be considering pre-sales or a mid-pre-sales career?
I would say building positive collaborative relationships is very important. I certainly had help in my career. I think it's very important to help build your brand, and particularly getting a mentor, I think, can help you build that network. A lot of people are put off by the idea of networking, but it's more than that. It's more about collaboration and working with people across the business. So that would be one piece of advice. The other one would be don't be put off from a career in pre-sales if you feel you're not technical enough. The key competencies of the role are around the ability to understand the customer. It's all the EQ competencies that can't be taught that we're looking for. Technical skills can be learnt. And then on the learning, obviously, always continue your development. So never stop learning, and continue to develop those competencies as you progress through your career.
Yep, excellent. And yeah, constantly developing is the role. That's what we're about, but it's also something that we love. And Sonya, what kind of advice would you give to females that are considering pre-sales, or maybe already in a pre-sales career?
Yeah, they were already really good answers, but I would say be curious, be exploratory in what you're doing. Part of the problem solving process is always wanting to see what else is out there. What is a different way we can think about solving a problem? So that curiosity, that thirst for new knowledge is really key to what you're doing. So I don't think pre-sales, I never knew it was an actual solution engineering as an actual role 10, 15 years ago. So I would have never have planned to get there. So don't expect your career to be follow A, then B, and then C, and then D. It's not going to unfold like that. So yeah, be curious and try things. And then the secondly is have courage to give things a go. Stumbling and along the way is okay, because you learn from the things that you've tried. So yeah, give things a go.
Good advice. Look, good advice all around. I will ask a quick question though on mentorship. Sonya, Hannah, Dimpy, do you have a mentor?
Yes, I've had several. Yeah, I would really recommend mentoring. My first mentor was absolutely amazing, and she really opened my eyes and broadened my horizons. And it's a really crucial part of career development.
Wow. And Dimpy?
Yes. So in fact, just so you mentioned mentor, I remember an advice that I got from one of my first mentors is it's okay to have some nerves before, before a very important customer meeting or presentation. I was always initial days, especially, I was always, I'm still nervous. If there's a big presentation, so I do get some nerves just before the thing. So what he said is it's okay to have some nerves, because it's indicative of how much you love your work that you have at hand. So it's an indicative of your passion towards your job. So that's something that has stayed with me. And yes, I've got several mentors on the way, because I kind of switched roles and switched companies as well. And they've all helped me reach where I am today.
Wow. And Sonya, did you mention that you do have a mentor?
Yeah, so definitely having a mentor and being a mentor as well. I think you learn a lot in that process. But what I would say is that there's different types of mentors or people. I've seen Wendy's made a comment there that mentors or coaches, thinking about people that can be a sponsor for you, that can advocate for you when you're not there, versus a person that can coach you, versus a person that can be your truth teller, that person that says, hey, what did you do in that situation? Have you thought about doing something differently? So someone that can be really brutally honest with you. It doesn't have to be a lifelong, career-long journey. It can be for a specific period of time as well. So I don't think that there's just one size fits all.
Yeah, and I think you touched on something quite valuable there. It's also about giving back. So Sonya, yourself, so Hannah, Dimpy, you're giving back now to the community. And that can also be done in the way of mentoring others once you've been 5, 10, 15 years in the role. So that's also crucial as well for the next generation. Okay, awesome. So what I'll do is I'm going to kick on audience Q&A. It's not going to be a voice Q&A. It'll be on chat. So please type up your questions and who they're directed to on chat, and we'll pass on those questions. Jonas, do we have any questions?
We don't have questions here, but I think Wendy basically reiterated the importance of having mentors. This actually has helped her navigate her career a lot. So I think it's along the themes of what your last questions are.
Yeah, so I'd say that if anybody's on this webinar and you don't have a solid mentor, then talk to your manager, have a chat, start taking on potential mentors so that they can help guide you.
There's a question that's come directly to myself from Gavin. He's asking what the strategies were that I used to overcome being anxious in meetings and being comfortable being uncomfortable. I think it was more a case of, at one point, I think I just decided not to care anymore. I've always gone red. I still do today. I'm probably red now. I just decided, look, I can't control it. It's just one of those things, and decided to not mind anymore. I always over prepare in meetings. That helps me overcome nerves. So I always rehearse and make sure I know my stuff, and I'm also anticipating any questions or objections. So that helps me with nerves if I feel like I'm ready. But it's also just throwing yourself into situations that are a little outside your comfort zone, and making sure that that's how you become comfortable being uncomfortable, because you're repeatedly throwing yourself into those situations and you just get used to it.
Wow,
Seize the opportunity.
So then we have one more, probably one question coming in. I think it's a really good one. Might be spin off to another series, but what should we look for in a mentor? Because given a short, we're all time poor, right? So what qualities and what would you recommend are the few things we should look for in a mentor? Would be a good question.
Wow, good question. Okay, Dimpy, let's ask you, what do you look for in a mentor?
I think for me, like over years, the mentors I've got, they've put trust in me. Even on the days when I wasn't on my best, they did put trust on me, and they encouraged me that I could do better. And they suggested way how to, rather than being someone who kind of I think constructive criticism is the word that I got from them, and I used it because I knew it came from a good place. So that's something I would look for in a mentor, who can constructively criticize what I have done. If I've not done my best, he recognizes that and pushes me to deliver my best.
Wow. Sonya, what about yourself? What do you think makes a good attribute in a mentor?
I think I'm drawn to people that I've seen do an amazing job of something, and I think, wow, I wish I could do that, or I wish I knew more about that space, or how did they get to what they're doing now? So there's something interesting that sparks me approaching them. But I think a good mentor also, you need to have that agreement between the two of you of what's the time commitment, what are you looking to get out of the mentor-menteeship relationship, what does that look like? So I think that agreement is really important.
Yep. And Hannah, what are your thoughts on a mentor?
I think similar to Sonya, it's about chemistry. So I've had some amazing people mentor me who just weren't aligned to my style. So I think finding someone that you gel with, that you really find inspirational, as Sonya mentioned, and ask them to be your mentor, that's the best thing to look out for.
Awesome. Okay, so thanks everybody. I'm going to just summarize some of the takeaways for today. So stretch outside your comfort zone, make the uncomfortable comfortable. Always strive to take on new opportunities. Branding is key. Be proud to show the world what you've done and how you've helped customers be successful. And don't go it alone. Collaborate with others and build community. And on that last point, find a good mentor. And if you've been in the industry for a while, then maybe consider mentoring some of the younger females who might be coming into the industry. Essentially, PreSales Collective, we're on the Slack channel. So we have an amazing Slack channel where we have 3,000 plus members globally for PreSales Collective. And I think about 1,000 of them are across Asia Pacific and Japan. So please have a look at the Slack channel, check it out, have a look at the website. check it out. There's also some free training on pre-sales capability. And also follow us on LinkedIn for more. So you'll be able to hear about upcoming webinars and upcoming information from PreSales Collective. Once again, it's global. So there are various chapters around the world, and they're all sharing constantly information, templates, diagrams, all sorts of training materials to help keep you up to date. So thank you for making the PreSales Collective possible. Thank you for Hannah, Sonya, and Dimpy for providing your stories. We really appreciate it. And also thank you for dialing in to this webinar. And I thank you for Jonas Lim too, who kept me on time and who answered and helped with a lot of the chat questions. So stay tuned for the next webinar. We'll be doing these monthly, and we look forward to hearing feedback from you. So thanks very much, everybody. Bye.